Hey everybody, this is Spotcast, and welcome to episode 4. Once again, I'm joined by Harm. Oh, sorry,
5.
Either.
Yeah, I was like we're gonna get a note about that one for sure.
I'd like to step in with a correction here, please.
Okay,
This is episode 5.
Real-time follow-up, ladies and gentlemen. It's episode 5.
All right, one more time.
How did that sound, though? Hey everybody, welcome to the Spotcast. Hey everybody, this is Spotcast. Welcome to episode 5. My name is Tim Mitra and I'm in Toronto, Ontario, and I'm joined once again by Jaime Lopez in Seattle, Washington.
How's it going?
Hey, we have a special treat today. We got our fact checker, Jonathan Kuehleien, joining us from Mississauga, Ontario.
It's a pleasure to be here with you, gentlemen.
Alrighty then.
Welcome aboard.
Okay. Yeah. So traditionally, well, we actually do have an Ask Spotcast, you know, but should we do the fact check before the Ask Spotcast? What do you think, Jaime?
I actually don't know because we don't have fact checking on the other show, so I think we can put it wherever we want. And we can,
all right. Well, let's do the Ask Spotcast. You want to go search for that one?
Give me a moment.
I know what it is. That's why I'm not looking for it. It's got to sound genuine.
Okay, so we have some listener feedback on hashtag Ask Spotcast. Ooh, that is really hard to say with a hard K. So we have some listener feedback on Twitter at hashtag Ask Spotcast. In this case, this comes from @LaModisFaux, and the statement is, or the question rather, is: if Star Trek Discovery is supposed to take place 10 years before the original series, where are all the women on the bridge with Kirk et al.? That's a good question. Right. The makeup of the crew is a little bit different for, well, I guess in this episode we'll see Discovery, and in the prior 2 episodes we saw the Senjo. Yeah, it definitely feels a little different, I think, than when you watch the 1960s TOS stuff.
Yeah, I mean, there's a whole lot of continuity stuff I find with anything like this. Like, because my point is, first of all, the Enterprise or the ship shouldn't be so dark based on what, you know, how bright it is on the original series, and they're wearing very plain uniforms on the original series, and here they've got all the sort of fancy, you know, insignia and things, and form-fitting outfits and that kind of stuff. And yeah, it's like they're, I mean, it's very 2017 in terms of the mix of cast between aliens and males and females, right? But it is odd that all of a sudden we go from, I mean, if you think about it in context, it's kind of like going back in time and doing like a first, second, and third movie before showing the actual 4th one, you know, which was done in 1977, if you know what I'm saying. So it's kind of odd to sort of kind of shoehorn this in, but it doesn't fit with the. So do we have to redo the original series to make it politically correct? I don't know. What do you think?
It's so funny because it was very progressive for its time, but time has moved on and it's not quite as progressive as it once was, even though it's still inspirational for what it tried to do.
Well, I mean, though, if you look at the first episode, the first couple of episodes, I'm thinking of Kirk and Spock, not so much the Cage or the original pilot. Well, even the original pilot had a female number 1, right? But the Uhura and Yeoman Rand are on the bridge, like right in the first episode, right? So, or at least I think they are. Maybe, we have a fact checker handy.
I don't have that information right at my fingertips, but I will definitely get that in the notes for the next episode.
All right. Okay. Anywho. All right. So yeah, I mean, that was my point. It's like, you're right. I think she's right that there isn't a lot of, there isn't a large mix of males and females as there are. I mean, like here we got the Shenzhou, which has, you know, a female captain and a female first officer, right? And then we slip right into the 1960s, you know, mini-skirted.
You got to look at the bright side, Tim. The miniskirt makes a comeback. That's fashion forward.
The miniskirt making a comeback? What do you mean, like now?
Well, no, 10 years in their future, all of a sudden the uniforms get much more hip.
Right, sure, okay. Okay. All right. Well, there you go. Since we had our fact checker available today, we thought we'd take advantage of Jonathan and have him go through the fact check that he did for episode number 2, because we did episode number 1 last week. And we'll see how that goes. And hopefully Jaime and I will have some real-time feedback and embarrassing guffaws and things like that. So, Jonathan, you want to lead off into the fact check?
Absolutely. So let's start at 311 of episode 2. Mr. Hom, you guys covered it a little bit, and the recap from last week, Mr. Hom was Loxana Troy's valet in Star Trek The Next Generation. He was played by the 7-foot-tall Dutch actor Karel Strijken. And you guys obviously straightened out your issues with My Lurch is Your Lurch. No, My Lurch is not your Lurch.
Yeah.
Jumping ahead to 529, you guys were discussing Kanye West and whether or not he belongs immortalized in space like Paul McCartney does. Personally, I think he's a genius and definitely belongs in space, perhaps literally.
Okay. So is that reference to the Paul McCartney and Kanye West, has to do with something about space, or just the fact that they were young kids of today didn't know who Paul McCartney was?
I think Jaime was referencing the fact that there was a duet between the two of them, and people who aren't old enough to know Paul McCartney thought, well, this guy's career was going to blow up after he starred on a song with Kanye. And apparently he's going to be okay. He's going to do okay. But I think the issue was whether in the annals of human history, if we're going to send Paul McCartney out as emblematic of human music, would we be willing to send Kanye out there? And I don't know. After his early 2000s, you can make a case. I mean, he put together some pretty big albums that are very popular with a generation just a little bit younger than mine. So
sure. What am I hearing in the background, by the way?
That could be my dog.
Oh, your dog. Okay.
He'd like to be a guest star. That's Kirby. He's helping out.
Well, Macintosh hasn't made an official appearance on Spotcast, so Kirby can get to be the first official dog on Spotcast. So that's good. All right. So next.
So moving on to 719, former U.S. President Richard Nixon never impeached. In fact, he quit before that could happen. So you referenced his impeachment while you were bored waiting for your dad to get off the television set watching the Watergate trials, and he actually quit before he could be impeached. Okay. 1611, Sonic Mania. My son is a huge fan of Sonic. You guys were referencing CRTs and that blur, and the unadulterated version, the version that Jaime was referencing of Halo, that had this great mode where you could go and make it look like its original mode. Well, the Sonic Mania game that just came out from Sega has a CRT mode. You can actually make your TV, your HD TV, look blurry like a CRT TV.
Wow.
Yeah, that's some old school stuff. 2305, Tim was referring to Asgard, home of the Norse gods in the Thor films, not Valhalla. Valhalla is the hall in Asgard where the slain in battle go. And I'm sure once we watch Thor Ragnarok, we'll all be clear on our area map of what's going on in downtown Asgard.
Sure. Okay.
2414, Victor Garber, the pride of London, Ontario. I'm just going to keep throwing those Canadian references in for our wide international audience. He was never on Buffy the Vampire Slayer, as I believe one of you gentlemen mentioned. He is, however, a sci-fi star in his own right, having been on J.J. Abrams' Alias show. He was on The Flash, and he's currently starring on Legends of Tomorrow.
Cool. Yeah, it's funny because Tammy was really shocked to find out that I haven't actually watched a whole lot of Buffy the Vampire Slayer. And I think I called her Buffy the Vampire Killer or something like that, and Tammy got all bent out of shape about that on Roundabout.
Yeah.
Carry on.
It's those of us who are passionate fans get a little defensive. We don't want that one to get forgotten in the annals of time.
Well, don't forget, to me, Buffy the Vampire Slayer is that movie that was really bad and that came out before the show, right?
Yes. So you can be forgiven for dismissing that one. 2445, Adrian Palicki, who is now starring on, of course, the Orville, that you guys talked about. She played Bobby Morse, who's better known as Mockingbird in the comic books, on the Marvel Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. TV show. And on the show, she wasn't actually killed off. She was sent off on a mission that got her disavowed, and that was a convenient way for ABC Television to write her out so they could try and make a spin-off show called Marvel's Most Wanted, but that one only made it as far as the pilot and never got picked up. So she was a free agent and landed herself a role on the Orville. 2615, Lieutenant Alara Katan, the Zalayan chief of security on the Orville, says she's 23 in episode 1. You guys were not quite clear on how old she was. 2655, they did not say what the gravity ratio was on Saleya compared to Earth. They just mentioned that it's many times that.
See, that's perfect. I thought for sure they had mentioned a number, and I was just failing to remember it. So it's good to see that my memory wasn't that bad.
Good stuff. 2754. The Krill is not what the bad guys were called on Galaxy Quest. The villain in Galaxy Quest was named Saris, but they never actually mentioned what his race is. And personally, I think the Krill look just like the Jem'Hadar from Star Trek Deep Space Nine. They've got that no neck thing going on. 2928. The Orville is like Firefly, Jaime. Seriously? I swear by my pretty floral dress, I will end you.
Say that again. Your pretty floral bonnet.
Oh yes, I swear by my pretty floral bonnet, I will end you.
Yeah, I think I called him out on trying to compare live on the show, compare Orville to Firefly.
Yeah, no, I'm okay with the Orville so far, but it's got a ways to go before it finds a place in my heart like the Firefly show did. So
I see. I think we need like an arbiter or something on this one, because I don't I understand the intent. I don't agree with it as a fact checking because it's a subjective nature sort of thing, right? It wasn't like, we said the wrong name or something. I'm like, I was trying to imply like, hey, it's not, Battlestar Galactica in terms of tone. It's much more like Firefly in terms of tone.
I'll put it to the Ask Spotcast listeners. Send in your replies. Is the Orville like Firefly?
Oh man, that poll's not going to do good. I'm going to accept my defeat.
3230. The Simpsons TV show is about to start its 29th season. It is the longest running scripted U.S. primetime TV series, according to the good folks at Wikipedia. Second is South Park, now just starting season 21. And for those who want to know, the longest running U.S. TV show in its entirety is Meet the Press, 69 years.
Wow. I thought Days of Our Life or one of those soap operas would have been for sure,
Yeah, I think there's a few of those that are up past 50, but Meet the Press, I think it said it had over 10,000 episodes.
Wow.
Yeah. So it happens when you're on every week for, 70 years. 3918. The original Star Trek models, the model kits, were made by a company called AMT, not AMC, as Tim mentioned.
Right, yeah. For shame. For shame.
4154. City TV is airing the Orville in Canada, and you can view it on Rogers On Demand, or you can view it via their mobile app, which is excellent. Means I can watch it on my iPad. 4415. Colin Trevorrow, director of Jurassic World, was originally slated to helm Star Trek Episode 9. 4433. Rumors are that Lucasfilm got cold feet on Trevorrow after his most recent film, The Book of Henry, tanked this summer. And
the Book of what?
The Book of Henry. Did you hear about it?
Exactly. That's perfect, Tim. That response was spot on. There's evidence.
I think it scored something around 22 on Rotten Tomatoes. And if anybody's interested on that, there's an excellent Fat Man on Batman, Kevin Smith's and Mark Bernardin's podcast where they talk about why they would fire somebody of his stature this far into the process. And it sounds like it came down to he made one movie that just went straight down the toilet, and that was enough for them. So
cool, yeah.
And finally, 5032, the quote guy who does Rebels, as Tim mentioned, who appeared at WWDC, I think you mentioned, was Dave Filoni, of course, who was one of the creators and guides for Star Wars Clone Wars. Correct my corrections.
See, we need a fact check on you now.
And of course, he is now working on Star Wars Rebels, which is just about to start its fourth final season.
Sure. Yeah.
And that is all your corrections for episode 2 of Spotcast.
Alrighty then. Yeah. So Dave Filoni is pretty cool. Yep.
And he always wears his trademark hat.
That's true. I have a picture of him in the WWDC app that I think I might have saved somewhere. But yeah, that's cool. Neat. All right. Did you want to stick around for the show, or do you want to beg off? Or?
It's up to you guys. I don't want to impose myself. If you
you can be our live studio audience, and then if you feel you've got something to contribute, or we might throw it to you, because we do realize that sometimes we get our facts a little foggy. So
yeah, well, if you need to check, I can keep the laptop going here. If you guys want to do live checks, you guys can keep the conversation going, and I can buzz in. Or
you can buzz in. Yeah, that might work too.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. All right. So hey, Jaime, let's jump into the FU. You got something here from Blade Runner.
Yes, this is from the YouTube channel, Lessons from the Screenplay, which covers various different types of screenwriting techniques and does a lot of comparisons. In this case, it's about a 7-minute video that covers how Blade Runner is a film noir example. Granted, it's definitely a sci-fi movie, right? And this one covers a lot of the different aspects that make it a pretty good candidate or example or prototype, you might say, for that type of film. I think the one I'll talk about here briefly is the fact that the hero, the protagonist here, is a private detective sort of role, right? Where he's not part of the official police force and he's not part of the criminal underground. It's sort of a gray character in terms of morality and skirts both lines between, good and evil. So something you'll see a lot in traditional film noir films that came out, like the 1940s or 50s, I think. Mm-hmm. It's a good video. Yeah, it's not that long. It's 7 minutes. So I highly recommend folks give that a watch.
Yeah, I could see that being a film noir. I was listening to a review. Obviously, I'm trying to avoid as much as I can the Blade Runner stuff. But again, Inner Space is running. They did that for the Star Trek lead up. They're doing little specials on talking to Harrison Ford and Ryan Gosling. And call me Gosling. I'll tell you why that in a minute. But talking to these guys and looking at that, some of the production shots and stuff like that. So I'm trying to avoid that. But one of the reviewers was on, like an actual film reviewer, I think it was on CBC now I think about it, was talking about the fact that the original Blade Runner was, even without the sci-fi aspect, which we all kind of gravitate towards, was a good movie to begin with, right? And I think I said it before after watching the final cut on my 4K TV, but not in 4K just yet, that every frame every frame was a beautifully framed shot. Like, I don't know who the director of photography was, but, with Ridley Scott's direction in terms of, I guess he was the director, right? Yeah, so direction. Every sort of view of that is a very complicated movie and very complex in terms of, rich textures in terms of the lighting and the fabrics and the props and that kind of stuff. And, it holds up incredibly well. Like, what is it, 25 years or something, however long it's been. So 87 it came out? No, 80. What year did it come out? 85, 84?
You looking for Blade Runner?
Yeah.
It must have been before that, as I remember seeing it. Let's just run it through the system here.
Might be 82. It was between Empire Strikes Back and
1982.
Return of the Jedi, right?
1982.
Yeah. So I didn't. Did I see it then? I must have seen it then. Anywho, So as a film itself, it stands up, and it does have that sort of Humphrey Bogart kind of. I like to joke and say it's plot number 27 from the 52 plots of U.S. Hollywood movies. Because it is very very similar constructed story in terms of, like you said, this guy who's like questionable ethics and sketchy past, and he didn't just retire, he quit, kind of thing, right? So
yeah, exactly. And that definitely gets talked about in the video. Also briefly, that the ostensible good side, the police are not perfect, they're flawed, heavily flawed, and in some cases unethical.
Right.
And the ostensible villains, the replicants, are not pure evil, mustache twirling people either. They've got ironically enough, a human side to them that fleshes them out as more than just a rote villain. Yeah,
it's interesting that whenever I watch that movie, I'm always struck by, like, there's a certain amount of naivete in the replicants, and meaning that they're very childlike in some ways, right? And they I guess they do kind of have temper tantrums too, but they're emotionally struck by their condition or their circumstance, right? And how they kind of relate to each other in that sense. Like when Roy is talking to Pris, about the fact that there's just two of them left and so on and so forth, that he's not very happy about that, and he becomes very emotional at that point, right? So I don't know, it's a great movie. I could go on for hours about it, but anyway, let's move on. So on our other podcast, our buddy Mark, who hasn't subscribed to CBS All Access, and Jaime has, of course, because he's watching the show, sort of had a prediction that he didn't think the CBSA would last, or all CBS AA would last. And I found a link here when I was trying to find a story that I read about on the Canadian side, but on the American side, we had 9.6 million viewers watch the show, and it got high critical praise.
I think it's pretty good because it's the sort of thing where you don't necessarily know how Star Trek will do. Like I know, Enterprise did okay, but apparently not good enough to stick around for a full 7 seasons. And Star Trek as a property hasn't been on TV for quite some time because it, I don't know, maybe kind of lost its way and maybe people sort of lost interest in it. And hopefully this is a good sign that there is renewed interest in, television-based Star Trek and that this will be successful. It's early days, of course, but we'll see what happens.
Right. And the other side of the story was the Canadian side, and that's what I really was looking for. And that is that in Canada, we reportedly had, I think the debut of Star Trek Discovery was the highest rated television show in Canadian broadcast history. Space television, congratulations to Teddy and AJ and Megan over there. They celebrated the most successful launch of any show. So with, where's the number I'm looking for here?
I'm looking for the number. I think it was like 1 point something million Canadians.
No, it's more than that.
I think you said 1.9, Jaime.
I said 1.9, but I can't even find that number now. So I'm reading right here.
Oh, it said 1.17 million viewers tuned in. I thought it was higher than that. We're talking.
Well, it does go higher for episode 2 at 1.2 million.
Right.
And then including the simulcast on CTV, nearly 2.2 have watched the premiere to date, making it the third most watched series debut on Canadian television this season.
Oh, so it's not a record.
I think it was like a streaming record. See, these things are breaking down so sort of concretely because it kind of depends on, are we talking broadcast television? Are we talking about, the same night that it came out versus what I'm seeing here is that they give it about a week for people to leak in and say, okay, well, you didn't watch it on the first night. Maybe you watched it on, 2 or 3 nights later when you had time and the kids were put down to bed or something. And then streaming is sort of its own thing. Like we're seeing this in the music industry as well, where there are individual streaming records now, not like musical records. I mean, this is a record that this many people have streamed this sort of thing, right? As opposed to purchasing the thing, which is largely the biggest thing in music. And for television, rather than having it be like broadcast numbers, which are still important, I think folks are just looking to see like, well, what does it mean for streaming services like Netflix, Amazon Video, Hulu, and CBS All Access?
Right.
Can I jump in?
Yeah.
I think the most interesting thing about the way CBS is doing the All Access is they've launched it with, sort of the regular lineup, and then this is their big move doing Star Trek Discovery. But they're in this excellent spot, too, where by going to this direct service, they get into Netflix territory where they don't have to give you the numbers, and they haven't. So far, they haven't shared any of their subscriber numbers. They haven't shared any of their download numbers. They haven't shared any of their usability numbers for Star Trek, and they don't have to. So just like Netflix, they can decide whether they're hitting the numbers that they want, and they don't have to go through the Nielsen ratings. They don't have to go through the scrutiny that other shows have to go through to get to this place. Even popular genre shows like Walking Dead and Game of Thrones still get rated. So this is kind of a neat little end round that CBS has kind of pulled, that they get to put this show out there, and we get the Canadian numbers because it's on Canadian cable, but they kind of control the message a little bit. So the message they put out is, well, we have a 200% year-over-year increase in downloads for All Access. But that could be anything. They could have gotten 5 last year and gotten 10 this year, or 20. But they've really got the ability to sort of protect this show, shelter it a little bit if they want to.
Yeah, I think that's a really good viewpoint. I think sort of related to that is the fact that they can have more creative freedom rather than like, well, what does Procter & Gamble think of this? Are they going to pull their ads because we showed something that was very controversial, right? They can decide to pull it themselves if they want to, if they feel uncomfortable as a company, but they won't be, creatively pressured by outside forces.
Now, the question, I guess, remains, because CBS obviously is tied to a public television network, the All Access entity that is, will they start pushing boundaries on Star Trek the way that some of the Netflix shows have been able to do by taking things like the Marvel characters and pushing them into darker and more adult scenarios? Will they have an appetite to do that with Discovery, where they can explore things that maybe Star Trek wasn't able to do before?
Yeah,
sure.
that certainly seems like a possibility. possibility. Similar, I think, to, I want to say it was Miramax. It was owned by Disney at the time. And, the Disney branding for distribution got put on, family-friendly things. And then the, sex and violence type stuff was tossed under the Miramax distribution brand. So they sort of played both sides.
That's where you get Clerks and Pulp Fiction and some of those things you can do off to the side, right?
Mm-hmm. Sure, yeah. Take a chance on them. By the way, I found the article that it was linked to the Space Channel Twitter account, which is @SpaceChannel, and it basically says Star Trek Discovery sets an audience record in Canada. So the numbers were 1.17 million viewers tuned into the premiere episode on Space TV. The record was quickly broken by episode 2, and where it grew 5% to 1.2 million, and then on CTV they had 2.2 million viewers have watched the premiere episode to date. So adding all those up, I think makes a significant number. And just we were talking before the show about in terms of frame of reference. I mean, those numbers may not sound great or large to Americans, but when you consider there's only 34 million of us Canadians up here, it does add up to quite a large percentage, right?
Yeah, I went with the 30 million while you were stating the numbers, and that comes up to about 3.9% of all Canadians watch that. So that's not a drop in the bucket. That's actually quite a few people who decided to all do the same thing.
Sure, yeah. Well, it's cold up here. We got nothing else to do except play hockey.
Nice.
All right. Okay, you got to have hockey in the show. All right. So anyway, let's get to the main part of the show here. So we had our this is episode number 3. Context is for Kings. And so just here's the warning for you if you haven't watched episode number 3 or episode number 2 or episode number 1, and if you haven't watched any of the Orville stuff, this is your spoiler warning. Turn off the TV right now, or no, sorry, turn off the podcast right now if you don't want to be spoiled. So I made some notes here that we can talk about. So my first gut instinct of this episode was, how they have the Alien versus Predator franchise. This was Alien versus the USS Glenn.
Yeah, I definitely can see that with a little bit of Event Horizon tossed in.
Right,
You've seen that movie, yeah.
Which had a disappointing end. Don't ever get me started on that one. Anyway, yeah, it was sort of that whole sort of what the hell happened here kind of thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So anyway, we met some new characters. We met Laundry, who is the chief of security, and another female, by the way, just for those of you keeping count.
And an Indian one at that.
Yep. Well, you can go there.
I
actually didn't
see enough
know that
representation in Star Trek. It's still something they're struggling with.
That's true. Well, Miss India was in the first Star Trek movie. She was played the character that took over by V'ger, right?
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, so she was an interesting character, sort of a no nonsense, very suspicious of our friend Michael Burnham and the two other inmates that were being transported. Again, this is plot number 22, where you've got a character that you want to have on your ship, so you hijack the transport that's going to take her from one place to another, or maybe you arrange to have her put on the transport so that you can then hijack the transport and have her end up on your ship, which seems to be the ulterior motive of our newly met Captain Gabriel Lorca, who we'll talk about a bit more. He's played by Jason Isaacs and seems to be a bit of a scoundrel, I would think is probably a safe way to say it.
I don't think you could choose a better actor to play a scoundrel. I think after his bona fides in the Harry Potter universe, boy, he was somebody who wanted to beat house elves and murder children.
That's true. Yeah, he was actually in a very short-lived show. I think it was called The Hole or something like that. It was really good. It was about him. He was in sort of in the same neighborhood that that other show was.
I love this game.
Oh, Homeland. The neighborhood that Homeland's in. That's sort of what do you call that? Middle East, right? I forget what the name of that what the show was though. It was really good, and but he was playing a cop who gets mixed up in this sort of strange, mysterious thing, and then it got canceled. So I'll never know.
Is that the OA?
No, not the OA. It was something. It was called. Oh, I'll have to look it up. We'll have to get our fact checker to look it up.
I'm just going through his IMDb page as we speak.
But the coolest thing that I saw, and we saw it for a split second, was those radically cool black badges, right, for the special ops guys, right?
Yeah, that'll be interesting to see, because sort of a theme I saw kind of coming through things is that this is going to be a crew that is a little bit more in the gray area of morality than we're used to. I think things tended to play, pretty squeaky clean and stuff like, The Next Generation.
Oh, yeah.
Kirk and company were pretty much, they did go rogue a little bit, but it was always for good intentions. intentions. And I think Deep Space Nine and to some parts Enterprise went a little bit deeper into the, are we doing this? Are we doing the wrong things but for the right reasons? And this is going much deeper than that. It's like, wow, like this feels like you could have had it be like a Section 31 kind of show where they're the people who do all the dirty work behind the scenes that nobody ever knows about, but it keeps the Federation safe, sort of thing. So I think it'll be interesting to see what ends up happening here.
Right. Now, in the setup in the cafeteria where seems that Security Chief Laundrie and her two other guards kind of let the inmates have a bit of a skirmish, and in the turbo lift shortly afterwards, Laundrie asks Michael Burnham about studying martial arts, and she mentions Susmahana, which I'd never heard of before, which is some sort of Vulcan thing. But apparently the Vulcan martial art is something else. I looked it up earlier, but didn't think I linked it here. But yeah, and then we get into meeting Captain Lorca shortly thereafter, and strangely enough, he's got the only not pregnant Tribble in the entire Star Trek universe.
And he drops it right next to a bowl full of food, which, as we know from the old Star Trek show, is how you make more tribbles. So
right, yeah. So
that could have gone bad very fast.
Yeah, but it was another one of those. It was an audio clue I mentioned in the show last week, or I think on the first episode. They had one of the klaxon noises coming from the computers that was lifted right out of the original series. And again, walking into this room, this darkened room where you meet Captain Lorca, immediately I hear the Tribble sound, and my brain just goes, "Oh, Tribble!" Like without even like I'm looking around the room now to see where the Tribble is, and thinking to myself, can't possibly be any Tribbles in this ship because they'd be all over the place, right?
Yeah, if they wanted to end the Klingon war right away, they just beam a couple of those suckers over to their ship, and that would settle things pretty fast.
Well, isn't that what they they do that in the Trouble with Tribble episode, right? So,
they hadn't learned that. That was 10 years to come. They hadn't learned that lesson yet.
Right. That was Kirk's craftiness, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So let's talk about Captain Lorca for a minute. What do you guys think of him?
I mean, I think he's very interesting because it seems like he has the best intentions, but I could see that he's willing to push things further than, might be normally treated as an ethical way to do things, right? Like it starts out sort of innocently enough in like, okay, well, he's somehow manipulated events so that he can get Michael Burnham onto the ship, and he's going to make her part of the crew, at least for some period of time, and get her expertise. But then it kind of becomes a little bit more obvious towards the end of the episode, when he makes the line that becomes the title for the episode, that universal law is for lackeys, context is for kings.
Right.
I think says a lot about his personality, right? That like, okay, following things like, I think in this time period, they don't have the Prime Directive, but something like that sort of universal rule is something that was adhered to as closely as possible in a lot of the other Star Trek series of like, you don't violate this thing knowingly unless you have some sort of other really good reason. And even then you feel terrible about it. Here, I think he's much more open to like, hey, the context is for kings, right? It's the sort of thing of like, you gotta break a few eggs to make an omelet sort of thing. Like,
right,
no crying over spilled milk, that sort of attitude of like, I'm going to find my way to success here. And success in his mind means winning this war against the Klingons, whatever it takes to do that.
That's an interesting point, though, you mentioned about the no Prime Directive. Do you think there is no Prime Directive? I mean, Captain, what's her name? Sorry, what's Michelle Yeoh's captain name again?
Philippa Georgiou,
yeah. So Captain Georgiou seems to have a very clear idea what Star Trek does and doesn't do. I mean, or sorry, not Star Trek does, what the Federation does and doesn't do. Like, we don't shoot first kind of thing, right? And it's an interesting, too, from that perspective, in that if you think about the original series was about space exploration. They were out there, looking at checking out the uncharted space, and that's where the Prime Directive came in. And that if they came across societies that were less advanced than they were not to interfere with them. They were to stay, neutral and even stay hidden in some cases, right? But here, there doesn't seem to be that. I mean, they're doing, biological testing or whatever. That whole transport mechanism that he reveals to Michael Burnham, Captain Lorca, right? But it's interesting that we're not just checking things out. We're actually seem to be well established in space. What do you think about that?
Yeah, it's just, I don't know. I find it interesting. If I were to compare things, and I know we'll end up probably talking at least a couple minutes about the Orville's episode.
Yeah, we will.
And compare and contrast. And I'd made the statement that I think this TV show, Star Trek Discovery, follows the spirit a little bit more closely of the J.J. Abrams universe.
Right.
And this episode in particular felt a lot more like a Battlestar Galactica episode, right? It tonally, like the kind of tone it had to it. And I think it's kind of interesting that we have this sort of setup where it is going to go that route, right? Like they didn't go too far into things. I mean, there was an overall plot here about, they're doing this kind of similar kind of experiment on a sister ship, the USS Glenn. Something goes horribly wrong. We have the Event Horizon moment of seeing all these terribly distorted and mangled bodies. They go and retrieve some stuff. They have the Aliens movie style setup where they get chased by the kitty cat that you have here in the notes. And then, Captain Lorca shows Michael Burnham like, hey, like here's this really cool technology. And oh, by the way, I think this is the way we can win the war. And then it ends a little bit darker after that, right? So it's, I don't know, it's just a very different kind of show. And this episode definitely felt like a pilot to me, which it kind of is, right? I mean, I'd mentioned that the first two episodes felt like more of a prologue because we really didn't meet any of the crew that we were going to stick with. And in this one, we meet, I think, everybody that we're going to stick with for a while here.
Yeah,
even some characters you hadn't mentioned quite yet, but that I think filled in quite nicely.
Yeah, that's interesting because I was thinking about that when I was watching the show, thinking, what would it be like if this was the first episode? Like, did they really need to do those first two episodes? They could have just, introduced Michael Burnham as this fabled, which is how they kind of presented her, this fabled Starfleet officer that, has this, gloried past and yet had done this really bad thing. She's the mutineer, and everybody knows her as the mutineer. She's got this black spot on her, right? Scarlet letter, if you will. And they could have started with that and not let us know what the backstory was behind, or are we supposed to, as the audience, feel, we trust her already because we're not in the same position as the people on Discovery are who don't know her backstory. We know her backstory, so we therefore know that she's not as bad as they think she is, right? I wonder what a different tone that would set if they started with episode 3 instead of the first two. What do you think?
Yeah, I think, well, it's kind of weird because I would say I liked this episode. Don't get me wrong. I liked the episode.
Oh, yeah.
But I didn't like it as much as I liked the other two episodes.
Really?
But in context of how I think they're trying to script things here, I really like the way they set this up with the first 3 episodes. And I'm going to choose a quote here from Voyager, and it's from Lieutenant Tuvok. Mm-hmm. And I don't remember the context, but at some point he says, without the darkness, how would we recognize the light? Mm-hmm. And in this case, we saw the light, right? We saw what the Senjo was like and how everything was a lot more squeaky clean and things went terribly wrong. They did everything by the book, roughly, and things didn't turn out the way they could have, as opposed to what we're going to see on the Discovery, where we're going to see the dark side of things and the contrast between how things were run on the Senjo versus how things are going to be run on the Discovery and what that means for our heroes, I think will be very interesting. And some of that would have been lost if we'd had it done sort of Voyager style or TNG style, where Ensero Laren and Tom Paris, who I'd mentioned before, how I felt they were kind of similar in character to Michael Burnham. We didn't really get a good sense of what exactly did they do. They talk about it a little bit, but we didn't see it. And in this case, we saw it with the character, and she did some real bad stuff, but for the right reasons. And that fits, I think, neatly in with the theme that Captain Lorca has proposed here.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. It's kind of weird. Like, are we going to find out that they're doing all these bad things? What we perceive as bad things, or they're being presented to us as bad things, that they're doing them for the actual right reasons. Like, for instance, why are they playing with these mysterious spores, this basidium that they talk about, or basidiac, when she's going over there and she starts realizing that he mentions I've forgotten her engineer boss's name. What's his name?
Lieutenant Stamets, I think.
Oh, Stamets. Yeah, I've got her.
Stamets.
Yeah,
I forget how it's pronounced. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Stamets. Yeah, Lieutenant Stamets. Her, and he's not pleased about having her in his crew, and messing around with this strange organic mechanism. But But it's sort of this like they're kind of like it's kind of being portrayed as unethical, right, in terms of what these people are doing, and that's kind of how the authors and the producers and directors are setting us up as an audience to see this as bad. But I'm reminded of I think I saw Alec Baldwin once on Inside the Actors Studio, and he was coaching, and part of that thing is about coaching young students who want to be actors, and the question came up about how do you play such a bad person, right? And his answer was, you play a bad person. You got to remember that the bad person doesn't know he's bad, right? The bad person, the evildoer doesn't know that what he's doing is evil. He's doing what he thinks is the right thing to do at that moment in time, right? So it's kind of like, they're playing with this, dangerous stuff, and they've got all these, secret codes and stuff like that, and they've got this strange creature, and at the end of it, spoiler for people who haven't watched the show, Captain Lorca, has the kitty cat transported onto the ship and then stored in a secure vault. But why, right? And we're left with a question, questioning ourselves, or meant to question Captain Lorca's motives in this sense, right? Some like you said, sometimes people seem to be doing the wrong things, but they're doing it for the right reasons, right?
Yeah, and I think this takes us to more of a writing style that and a setup that's kind of like The Sopranos or Breaking Bad, where the protagonists that we're rooting for, like, they're the bad guys, right? Like they're not
criminals,
they're not good people. Yeah. Granted, in this case, the crew of the Discovery aren't straight up bad guys like drug dealers and mob bosses, but they're definitely not distinctly good guys either. Even though they're fighting for what we would call the correct side, right? The Federation side.
Well, it's like, Tony Soprano doesn't see himself as a bad guy. He sees himself as a businessman, right? Who's willing to do anything for profit. If you think about it, you could skew it any way you want, what the things he does, and he has all the stress and struggles of a person who's running a large company, right? He in fact has a therapist for it the whole bit, right?
Right.
But actually we should talk about this at another interesting point too, and it all sort of ties into, it seems like everybody on the ship is bad except for two characters I can point out. One is her somewhat autistic roommate, which I've forgotten her name, and
that would be Sylvia Tilly, who's a Starfleet cadet,
right? And she's all gung ho and apparently so on the spectrum that I guess that people can't live with her. But the other thing is that First Officer Saru is Michael Burnham's former chief science officer, right? Chief science officer, and now he's the first officer of this ship, and he seems to be like in a Vulcan sense very ethical, and so he must know what's going on this ship too, right? So he must be complicit in the questionable activities.
Yeah. We'll have to see how his personality works, because in the first couple episodes we saw sort of that fear aspect that he brought, for his personality, and part of that attributable to his species. Here we saw a little bit of a different take, where he's uncertain and certainly feels a bit, I wouldn't say revengeful, but certainly resentful of Michael Burnham. But yet we see that he, at the very least, doesn't let that cloud his judgment and objectivity around, is this person, Michael, is this person somebody worthy of going on a special mission like they had when they decided to send her to the USS Glenn to retrieve the experimentation stuff, right? Like he straight up said, like, this is the smartest person I know, or something similar, and which led to the brief bit of levity when Captain Lorca turns to the engineer Stamets, and says, like, and he knows you, right? It's like, burn.
Right,
he knows you, and he says that this person's smarter than you.
Wow. Yeah, for sure. Anyway, so we talked about the kitty cat, but and the other name I put up here was Commander Aram, which I think was just somebody on the ship who, obviously, if they can call her by name. I think I've also discovered too that there was a couple of characters on the away team that didn't have any lines, if I'm not mistaken, and I don't think they came back on the away mission, right? Like, didn't they lose?
I definitely remember the bald guy, the special ops kind of person that had the gun. Was there another one? It went so fast in that early bit, right, when they get on the ship and everything goes bad and they're trying to escape.
I think they lost a couple of them on that away mission.
Sure, yeah. And there was a Klingon that was shushing them, which was really sort of strange, right?
Oh, yeah. We kind of overlooked the fact that, as presented as the hypothesis, they said, well, the Klingon bodies that we found on here, and then they found the other guy. like they're not all distorted. And they said, oh, well, probably because, the crew got damaged from the experiment. And then this Klingon ship came by, realized that there was nobody, the lights were on, but nobody was home. So let's go steal some tech. And then they got murdered by the kitty cat.
The alien. Yes, for sure.
Yeah, when we say kitty cat, it's more like, like a tiger kind of kitty cat, space tiger.
Yeah, space tiger, space spider or something. Hey, we should move on to the Orville. But before we do, I want to talk about this link you posted here about the Windows code.
Yeah, so I don't actually have, there's like actual YouTube channel, and I shared this with you once before, Tim, that like they try to find the source of where does this computer, quote unquote computer code come from when they use it on films and TV. And in this case, I definitely noticed this. I didn't know the root source of it, but I definitely recognize that when Michael Burnham's given this task of, hey, go look at this code and tell me what's wrong with it. And, we see the nice little augmented reality screen come up. I say, wait a minute, D word. I was like, whoa, that looks like Windows code. Like I did some Win32 programming back in the day. And sure enough, this article on The Verge claims that this is decompiled code for the Stuxnet virus, which is a famous Windows virus that went around some time ago. So kudos on that. That was a nice little unintentional Easter egg, I think.
Nice. Yeah, because she ends up finding the flaw in the line or whatever. I think he's just giving her busy work to keep her busy, right?
So it would seem, or at least, narrowing down the amount of information she could possibly have while maybe still being vaguely useful, like, having the intern bring some coffee, still useful. You still get coffee out of it, but it's not necessarily critical path type work.
Sure. All right. Well, let's talk about the episode 4 of the Orville, If the Stars Should Appear, which is kind of like Shore Leave meets Westworld, right? So what do you have to say about that one? What do you think about that? It's interesting. Just a quick observation on the Orville. It seems to be that, they can get into these calamities, but they still manage to solve the problem within 40 minutes, right?
Yeah. This episode for sure made me think that this is the spiritual successor to TNG. This is Seth MacFarlane wanted to write Star Trek The Next Generation and couldn't get the rights to it. And this episode feels that way, especially with the way they resolve it. So quick plot synopsis. The Orville encounters this massive ship. It's just kind of drifting. They realize, oh, like, holy smokes, this is going to, in 6 months or something, it's going to fall into this star and burn up. So they get on board, they see all this technology, and then they come through this portal and realize, oh, this is like, an actual environment, an Earth-ish like environment that people can go and live on. And they encounter the local people who don't even realize that they're on a ship. They think this is the entirety of the universe. And they have this whole religion based on an individual whose name I can't remember. It was like Dorgal or Dougal or something. And there's a conflict between folks who believe that there is something beyond what they can see outside. And the Orville crew gets involved in that. And to wrap things up, the Orville discovers the control center for this ship. They discover the last message of the previous pilot, which turns out that pilot's name is the same as the creator or God that they've been pursuing this whole time or worshiping this whole time. And the Orville crew decides to open up the sunroof, I think they called it, where rather than having this simulated, it's always daytime sort of environment, they open it up and you can see the night sky, the stars, and it sort of ends on a happy note, right? That like, hey, they've shown the truth. They've uncovered these people's eyes so they can see again. And they say, oh, by the way, hand wave you, the Planetary Union will send some folks who fix your engines and it'll be hunky dory. And it definitely ends like a TNG episode of like, okay, everything's reset again.
Everything's happy. Yeah. Never mind the fact that, this is like, you can't handle the truth. Maybe they can't handle the fact that they're on a spaceship drifting through Earth. This is very, it reminds me of an old, I think 1970s TV show, Canadian TV show called The Star Lost, where these people are, 3 people are wandering around and figure out that the ship is broken down, and they meet all these other people on this arc that's traveling from one place to the other who don't even realize that they're on a spaceship. And also almost like the last episode of Doctor Who. Did you watch Doctor Who this season, Jaime?
I have not. Has that season started very long?
No, the one that just ended. The one that just ended with Bill and Peter Capaldi.
No, I figured I would pick up with the new Doctor. I don't know her name. I figured that might be my entrance into the Doctor Who.
Really?
What do you all call each other? Hooligans?
Hooligans.
Fact checker?
Hooligans. Yeah, they're Whovians. Hooligans sound so much cooler.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, for sure.
It's got an edge to it.
You know,
right?
they're
Sounds
from
more
England.
dangerous.
They like to dress up. They're hooligans. They're Whovians. Whatever.
Yeah, sure, for sure.
The name you guys were searching for was Dural.
Doral, yeah.
And played by, did anybody catch the cameo?
Oh yeah, that was great.
Yeah.
They didn't even talk about that. It wasn't previewed anywhere. It was just kind of an out of nowhere.
Liam
kind of
Neeson.
Right. Yeah.
Yes, that was a lovely little cameo. Of course, he and Seth MacFarlane worked together in A Million Ways to Die in the West. So,
which I still haven't watched yet.
It's actually it's a pretty good laugh. It's not high art, but it'll make you laugh.
Right, for sure. Yeah. So, anyways, it's kind of I'm sure this is again another one of those plot points or plot stories that seems to be pretty common. That people are floating around and don't realize that they're actually. In fact, we are sitting right now on a big giant spaceship hurtling through the universe. I don't know if you know that or not. Right. So
great. Now I need to go lie down.
They did leave us with a few things that I think might come up through the later part of the seasons. One was the sort of marital strife between Bortus and his husband. They're feeling a little bit of tension. So I think we might see some more in the future about, the work-life balance sort of thing, work and family. We saw some hints that, holy smokes, we just said her name. What was her name? The security officer, Kanara?
Yeah, her.
Alara, thank you. That she has some sort of crush on the captain, which it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. And the way that they sort of came heroically for the XO, which happens to be the captain's ex-wife, they've dropped several hints throughout the series so far that they might have a will they, won't they sort of thing about resolving their problems and getting back together. So I feel like those are some of the plot lines or threads that might be woven into episodes coming up.
Really interesting, yeah.
And it's definitely worth a watch for at least some of the moments that the android Isaac has. He's got some really good lines in there. Definitely some Lieutenant Commander Data kind of lines that I found appealing.
Especially when they were discussing the human male anatomy. That seemed to be an issue of fascination for the Isaac character this week. An excuse for Seth MacFarlane to write penis jokes.
Right.
Yeah.
And just, I think I mentioned it before, but the sort of, I cue into the audio cues and I found the music in this episode very reminiscent of the original series in some ways. Like some of they almost had the actual melody lines. They came very close and then they kind of turned away at the last second to save themselves from getting sued. But there was definitely some tones in this episode of the Orville that made it reminded me of the kind of things you would hear on the original series of Star Trek. That is.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So before we wrap it up, we should sort of mention that Jonathan and I are going to go see Blade Runner tomorrow night, less than 12 hours from now or 24 hours from now. And we're looking forward to that. So
something I never thought I'd be able to say in my lifetime. We're going to see the sequel to Blade Runner.
The sequel to Blade Runner, yeah.
It's only been 35 years. I mean, really, why so soon?
Right. So I was watching Graham Norton show the other day, and they had a clip of Harrison Ford and Ryan Gosling on the show, and it starts off pretty funny because Harrison Ford sort of can't remember what Ryan's name is because it's Ryan. What's your name? Ryan, and then he starts calling him Ryan Gosling at one point, which is why now I'm stuck in my head Ryan Gosling. But anyway, that's so Harrison Ford likes the script and he likes the actual final version of the movie, which I think is notwithstanding the 94% Rotten Tomatoes, which is apparently pretty high if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. So and a lot of people that have seen it have been saying it's really, really good, which is why I'm kind of putting my fingers in my ears and going la 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 la. I don't want to know. Don't tell me. So, but of course we'll know soon enough.
Can we have Denis Villeneuve do the next Aliens film too, please?
Well, you think?
Because if he can go in and work with our esteemed Blade Runner and Aliens creator to maybe do a little polish on that, because that last one was not. That could use some help.
I haven't seen that one yet.
Yeah, you have really. I think we just saw it on the Star Trek episode this week.
Okay.
Yeah, I haven't seen Covenant either, but apparently I don't need to anymore.
Yeah. Right. You've seen it. It's fine.
Right. Okay. Good to know. All right.
Yeah, Tim, while you're trying to go la 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 and avoid things for the last few days here, avoid the the American trailer, I think, that just came out. People have been saying that it looks like it essentially spoils the whole movie. So
man.
you see the word movie trailer anywhere online, just avoid it like the plague.
Skip it. Well, I've only got, like I said, it's 10 o'clock now as we record. We'll be seeing it tomorrow at 7, so 7:30. Woohoo! Woo. All right. So, hey, let's wrap it up. So, hey, Jaime, if people want to get a hold of you on the interwebs, where would they look?
Best places on Twitter. I'm at Dev with a hair.
Right. And Jonathan, if people want to get a hold of you, where would they look?
I am at JPK News.
All right. So, what's happening with JPK Comics? Are you going to resurrect that, or what's your plan with that?
You know, I think I have these whims from time to time. I still read, a fair bit of comic book consumption going on here, but it's finding the time. It's awful hard to be a working person and find a little extra time for everything, raising a couple of kids. So I'll have to try and carve out a little time. I could throw those into my picks for the week if you'd like. We'll just move it over to the podcast world. You guys can pitch TV shows, and I'll throw in a couple of comic books to boot.
Hey, that would be good. Yeah. Because, Jaime, you read a lot of graphic novels, I'm supposed to call them.
No, comic books. They're comic books.
Oh, what's the difference? I'm lost now.
Well, it's the amount, right? Like comic books, I still read mine in the old-fashioned floppy format. I read them month to month, and then they put them in collections and sell them at Chapters, or whatever the Seattle equivalent to Chapters is. Amazon walk-in store, Barnes and Noble. Do they still have a Barnes and Noble?
Right. So when they glom the whole series together into a hardcover book or softcover book, that's what you call a graphic novel?
Or some people are writing those in original format too. They're writing, a 200-page original all-in-one story. But if you're taking a 22-page comic book that comes out monthly and sticking it all together, some people are calling that a graphic novel too. For me, that's just a serialized. It's like buying a TV season box set. It's essentially what you're getting. You're getting a serialized story that's been glued together.
Right. Yeah.
Sometimes it's cohesive, sometimes it's a little less cohesive. But there's certainly lots of people who are writing original graphic novels, which are just visual storytelling, sequential storytelling.
All right. So as I said at the top of the show, my name is Tim Mitra. I am TIMMITRA on the Twitter machine, and that's probably the best way to get a hold of me. And don't forget, you can, as we'll mention in the after show, you can hit us up with any kind of comments, and if you include at pound or hashtag AskSpotcast, then we will certainly loop it into the show. So until next week, we'll say goodbye.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Goodbye.
If you want to find out more about the podcast or see episode show notes, visit the Spotcast website at spotcast.com. You can get in touch with us on the website or follow us on Twitter at Spotcast. If you have feedback or questions, send us a tweet with the hashtag AskSpotcast. If you like the show, please consider recommending us to a friend, writing a review on iTunes, or pledging any amount on patreon.com/Spotcast. You can find out details on how to help us out on our website at Spotcast/sponsor us. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you in the future.
Can I do my corrections now? I've got corrections on your episode as we go. Do the live corrections?
Yeah, why not? Go ahead. You have 4 minutes.
Okay. Well, I think I might have your TV show for Mr. Isaacs. Was it called Alive?
No.
What? Oh,
maybe. Well,
Case
maybe.
History? Case History? No, that's not it.
What year was it?
Nope, that's not the one.
It was I think it was like The Hole or something like that. Actually, where's my IMDb? Where's my IMDb?
I've got it up here. I'm going through. Oh, Awake. How about Awake?
No.
That one says he's living 2 lives. Is that the one you were talking about?
No.
A police officer living 2 alternate parallel lives?
That was a good show too. I did watch that for a while, but I don't know how long that was. 2 dreams, 1
reality. It says. I must admit, I've got some gaps in my Jason Isaacs.
You know what? That was another good movie. That was another good TV show. I think it was only on for a short time. They canceled it right away. Like, not right away, but they canceled it after.
I think it's nine episodes. It says here on IMDb.
Yeah, just as it was getting good. No, it was something else. Maybe I think I mentioned before. I mentioned before that there's another actor that I get what's his name?
Jason Isaacs.
There's another actor I get Jason Isaacs mixed up with, but I don't think in this case I have. Let me just see.
Well, will you look that up? I've got a couple other little bits here for you.
Yeah.
Jaime, you mentioned Battlestar Galactica, and I could not agree more. That's the feel I get from Star Trek Discovery. Nice little Easter egg this week with the new security officer is, of course, Rekha Sharma, who played President Rosalind's aide on Battlestar Galactica. So that's a nice little, for those people who like their sci-fi tied on a nice little bow, that's a nice little bow there. And I found myself watching this week's episode of Discovery thinking, I know that face of the actor who's playing the chief engineer. And I couldn't quite place it until I finally looked up his IMDb. And of course, that's Anthony Rapp, who was in Dazed and Confused. He was Tony in Dazed and Confused.
No way. Wow.
So, and he was in School Ties. I mean, he's been an actor since the 80s. He was in Adventures in Babysitting. He was in, he was on an episode of The X-Files. He's been all over the place. And but of course, for me, in my generation, of course, he's Tony from Dazed and Confused. Good to see him.
Yeah.
Good to see him.
By the way, I was so close with the name Hole because the name of the show is Dig.
Dig.
That was close.
Yeah.
Pretty much the same thing.
I'd call that pretty close. It's on theme.
Yeah, it's something to do with he's something to do with archaeology and this mysterious girl. Yeah, you see, like it's 10 episodes and then it was never came back.
What? I think I hear Mac. I think he just made his guest appearance.
Yeah, because I think Carol's just come home, or La Modeste Fou, as we said at the top of the show.
Yeah.
All right, folks. Yeah, I mean, I have to go switch podcasts.
Alrighty.
So thanks for joining us.
Okay, cool. Modiste Faux. How's one read that Twitter handle, Tim?
Oh, sorry, I was on mute. La Modiste Fou. Yeah, and it's funny, we got the bonus episode. Well, I'll say this again during the show, but we got the bonus episode. Like, it seemed like we got the Sunday and then the Thursday, and then there's been like a drought. There's like, I'm thinking, like, did I miss this episode? Have I missed an episode?
Yeah, it kind of throws you off a little bit.
Yeah. Oh, I don't have any picks for this week. Neither do you. Well, Jonathan and I are going to go see Blade Runner.
I was going to say, how's Blade Runner work for you?
Yeah, go for that one.
All right. Well, I've already mentioned a couple of times that I'm going, but we'll say it again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't have anything that I expect to see. I'd like to go see Blade Runner, but I probably have to convince the lady to watch the original on Netflix or something first, and then we'll go see
really?
it. Yeah, because I guarantee there's like very little chance she's actually seen Blade Runner.
Yeah. Let's bring that up again because if I don't remember to say this, that they showed Blade Runner this weekend, but they showed the original Blade Runner, like with the voiceover.
See, this is where we need to fact check on this one because there's like 20 different versions.
Well, that was the original theatrical release. They call it wasn't the original one.
There's like at least 7, I think, versions.
Yeah. Well, Jonathan can answer that in a minute because he's got the box set.
Yeah, I do. I was going to add to your list, Tim. I know you own like every copy of this movie ever made. The one that is not in your collection yet. I saw that the iTunes store for Canada has the 4K version available for the low price of $6.99.
What?
And you have?
But I already own that one.
You don't own the 4K version, do you?
Well, no, but Jaime can fill you in. Didn't they say if you had it, you would get the 4K version?
Oh, did you already own the iTunes version?
If you had the iTunes HD.
Oh, well, and now all you need is the new Apple TV, and you're all set. You can hook it up to your 4K TV, and it's an all new experience.
That's true. All right. Okay.
Ew. Gotta get rid of this old Backstreet Boys t-shirt.
Tell me why.
Because it stinks, boys.
Tell me why.
I've washed it so many times, but the odor won't come out.
Tell me why.
No, you tell me why I can't get rid of this odor.
Have you tried Downy Rinse and Refresh? It doesn't just cover up odors. It helps remove them.
Wow, it worked, guys.
Yeah.
Downy Rinse and Refresh removes more odor in one wash than the leading value detergent in 3 washes. Find it wherever you buy laundry products.
Ya llegó nuestro mejor Black Friday y tenemos miles de ofertas toda la semana, como hasta 75% de descuento en joyería fina después del 40% de descuento extra. Y da un paso adelante con botas para ella a solo $19.99. Además, encuentra toallas Home Expressions a solo $2.99 cada una. JCPenney, celebraciones que valen la pena. Ofertas válidas hasta el 26 de noviembre en la tienda en selección de estilos. Aplican exclusiones. Ofertas de Black Friday se excluyen de los cupones. Detalles en la tienda con un asociado.